Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai go premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsudevaya. 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 We're reading from the first canto, 9th chapter, the passing away of Bhīṣmadeva, and this is text 25. Sūta Uvacha Yudhiṣṭhirasthad akarshnya Shayanam Sharapanjare Aprichchad Vividan Dharman Vishinam Chanushinvatam Sūta Uvacha Yudhiṣṭhirasthad akarnya Shayanam Sharapanjare Aprichchad Vividhan Dharman Vishinam Chanushinvatam Sūta Uvacha Yudhiṣṭhirasthad akarnya Shayanam Sharapanjare Aprichchad Vividhan Dharman Vishinam Chanushinvatam
Sūta Uvacha
Sūta Uvacha
Yudhiṣṭhirasthad akarnya Shayanam Sharapanjare Aprichchad Vividhan Dharman Vishinam Chanushinvatam Sūta Gosvāmī Yudhiṣṭhira Shayanam Sarvanjare Abrichadriganam Rishinam Shrinatam Sūta Gosvāmī Yudhiṣṭhira Shayanam Sarvanjare Abrichadriganam Rishinam Shrinatam.
So I don't know if you can see this. This is the painting of Bhīṣmadeva lying on the bed of arrows. There's another painting. This is an older edition. There's another painting. It's an amazing painting, more dramatic than this. So when we say bed of arrows, it means his body was pierced with arrows, and that became his bed. Amazing. So that's what's happening now in the Bhagavatam. Bhīṣmadeva is preparing to leave his body. It's become the proper time for him to leave. There's an auspicious time to leave the body in inauspicious time according to the constellations. And now the constellations are coming to the time when he wants to leave his body. And also Krishna's coming. So today's verse. Word meaning. Sūta Sri Sūta Gosvāmī said, Yudhiṣṭhira, King Yudhiṣṭhira, Tat, that, Akarnya, hearing, Shayanam, lying down, Sharapanjare, on the bed of arrows. Aprichat, asked. Vividhan, multifarious. Karman, duties. Rishinam, of the ṛṣis. Cha, and. Anusrinvatam, hearing after. Sūta Gosvāmī said. Okay, you were trained up. Let me just read it. Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira, after hearing Bhīṣmadeva speak in that appealing tone, asked him, in the presence of all the great ṛṣis, about the essential principles of various religious duties. So this verse is referring to the last verse. So let me read the last verse and then I'll read this again. So this verse says, after hearing Bhīṣmadeva speak in that appealing tone. What was that appealing tone? That was the previous verse. And this is what Bhīṣmadeva said. May my Lord, who is four-handed, and whose beautifully decorated lotus face, with eyes as red as the rising sun, may my Lord, who is four-handed, and whose beautifully decorated lotus face, with eyes as red as the rising sun, is smiling, kindly await me at that time when I quit this material body. Oh, and whose beautifully decorated face with eyes red as the face is smiling. So, and now, this verse again we'll read. Sūta Gosvāmī said, Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira, after hearing Bhīṣmadeva speak in that appealing tone, asked him, in the presence of all the great sages, about the essential principles of various religious duties. Purport. Well, this was Krishna's desire, that Bhīṣmadeva would speak to Yudhiṣṭhira and that other great sages would be there. Yudhiṣṭhira is an amazing personality. He's one of the Mahājans. And what's so amazing is that he's speaking with his body stuck full of arrows. I mean, there are many amazing things. That's one of the most amazing. Bhīṣmadeva, speaking in that appealing tone, convinced Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira that he was very soon passing away. And Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira was inspired by Lord Krishna to ask him of the principles of religion. Lord Sri Krishna inspired Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira to ask Bhīṣmadeva in the presence of many great sages, indicating thereby that the Lord's devotee, like Bhīṣmadeva, although apparently living as a worldly man, is far superior to many great sages, even Vyasadeva. Did you know that? Is that news to you? That Bhīṣmadeva is given a superior position to Vyasadeva, and Vyasadeva compiled the Vedas. So he's an extraordinary personality. Bhīṣmadeva. Bhīṣma means terrible. It also means firm, solid. And this name was given to him when he was a Kshatriya. He was a warrior class, and the warriors all got married. And he took a vow not to marry. So you might think, why did they think that was so wonderful? Because the Kshatriyas always married. That was their dharma. And to allow his father to remarry, it was necessary, or at least the only way it could happen is if he took a vow of celibacy. So when he took that vow, the god said, Bhīṣma. Basically, it was like, wow. You could say Bhīṣma means wow. Wow. He took a vow. Bhīṣma. Terrible. That's awesome. Or whatever you say in your country. Something like that. Like this is a terrible vow. It's like, oh, he's a Kshatriya and he's not going to get married. So, and he was propositioned by some women who had become attached to him, who wanted to marry him. And he said, no. I've taken a vow of celibacy. And they went to his spiritual master, said, please ask him to marry us. He had some connection with them to help them. And at least one of them grew attached to him. So the spiritual master said, marry. And he said, no, I've taken a vow of celibacy. And the spiritual master said, you must marry or I'll kill you. And they had a fight. I don't recommend fighting with your spiritual master, but these are Kshatriyas. And his spiritual master couldn't defeat him. He said, okay, you don't have to get married. So he was a special person. And the point that Prabhupada's making here is that generally you would think that if you're going to hear spiritual knowledge, you would hear it from a Brahmin. A Brahmin is not engaged in worldly affairs. And here we see Bhīṣma was fighting a battle. He was a general, so he was always involved. On the battle or off the battle, he was involved in some kind of politics. And so Prabhupada's making the point, you would think that you would want to hear from someone like Vyasadeva, you wouldn't want to hear from a warrior and a politician. And the Prabhupada's saying he was such that he was more learned even than Vyasadeva. And also another thought that comes is he's giving practical wisdom to Yudhiṣṭhira about how to run the kingdom. So that makes sense because he's a Kshatriya. So he should give that wisdom. Another point is that Bhīṣmadeva at that time was not only lying on a deathbed of arrows, but was greatly aggrieved because of that state. In other words, In other words, we think, well, he's got some mystic power, so he's lying on this bed of arrows, but it's like, yeah, for him it's no big thing. And Prabhupada's saying it is a big thing. We shouldn't minimize the fact that he had this blessing that he could die at will, but there's arrows piercing his body. It's not like he had anesthesia or anything. So Prabhupada's making the point that it was painful. But he wanted to die seeing Krishna. And so he wasn't going to leave his body even though it was painful. And what to speak of speaking. So your mind has to be so. You ever been in pain? If you're in severe pain, you can't. All you can do is basically scream and yell and hit anybody that comes near you if you're in severe pain. Isn't it? Yes? Hit your doctor, right? Some people are in pain, hit their doctor. Isn't it? You ever been hit? All right, it's confirmed. So, yeah. One should not have asked him any question at that time. It's like such an awkward situation. He shouldn't have been questioned. But Lord Krishna wanted to prove that his pure devotees are always sound in body and mind by dint of spiritual enlightenment. And thus, in any circumstances, a devotee of the Lord is in perfect order to speak of the right way of life. So, Bhīṣmadeva was the right person to speak to Yudhiṣṭhira, and this situation glorifies Bhīṣmadeva. So it was Lord Krishna that wanted him to speak. And Prabhupada saying, in this condition, generally you don't ask somebody to speak, he said, but it was actually Krishna's desire, both to enlighten Yudhiṣṭhira and those present, and also to glorify Bhīṣmadeva, that he can speak in this condition. And so obviously, I think most of you, when you just heard this, you must have thought of Prabhupada in his last days, and we have the video that many of us have seen of Prabhupada translating the Bhagavatam days before he left his body. And he hadn't eaten 3 or 4 months. Very, very thin. There was a story that when Prabhupada came back to Vrindavan from England, he was preparing to leave his body, and he really couldn't eat. And so he was calling devotees to come, and it was a few months before he left his body. And the devotees who were taking care of Prabhupada would have to tell devotees that are visiting him, that hadn't seen him in a long time, they'd have to warn them that Prabhupada is very frail. Because if they weren't warned when they would come in and see Prabhupada, they'd just break down and start crying. Because he had no energy, he wasn't eating. And even though the devotees were warned, Prabhupada hasn't been eating, he's very thin, you're gonna just don't cry.